So I'm gonna try this super weird angle, but let's just go with it. I'm trying to move back to Missoula for the school year this fall, and had some caffeine this morning, so my mind's just racing. And no matter what I do, if I listen to music, if I listen to podcasts, can't listen, thoughts keep going. So just want to kind of talk about the current issue, which is the USPS controversy, and whether or not there should be mail-in voting, which has also devolved into a kind of a conversation about, well, there's all these rural communities who depend on the post office, and there's all these people who live out in rural communities whose lives are threatened by the defunding of the USPS service. And I think those are actually two different issues, and it's interesting to see Democrats attack the one, which is that, we need mail-in voting because of the coronavirus, while everyone's protesting outside. That's just another level of irony, and that's not to say that I'm not in favor of these protests. I'm just saying that there is a level of hypocrisy there. But it's interesting to see them attack that one argument, or promote that one argument that we need mail-in voting because of this pandemic. And when Donald Trump attacks that issue, which is debatable, like honestly, I don't really care about that issue. I don't really care about the mail-in issue. I think all elections are corrupted. I think the simple fact that we only have two options that are dominated by the two major parties makes every single election illegitimate. The fact that if I vote for Biden, somehow I'm subjected to Donald Trump's policies if he gets elected, I think that makes an illegitimate system, especially when we are living in a society that was founded upon the idea of federalism, and that we would live in communities that would be their own laboratories of democracy. I would live in one society with our own local policies, and you would have an experiment going on the other side of the country with other policies. We weren't supposed to be in a top-down system. So, the question of whether or not mail-in voting will lead to illegitimate elections, to be honest, doesn't really matter to me, because the whole system is illegitimate. The fact that the debate commission that rules how candidates will get on the debate stage, the fact that that is the commissioners on that commission or the committee are appointed by the government, and a lot of those people are party members who used to be at the top of parties who are now in the debate committee. So, and some arbitrary rules after presidential, I think it was the Bush election, after there were a lot of third-party support, the debate commission basically changed the rules arbitrarily so that third-party candidates needed 15% in polls, and a certain amount of polls. So it's super arbitrary, when these rules actually used to be decided by the League of Women Voters, who actually hosted these debates. But now all the rules are governed by a governmental institution. So the question of whether or not mail-in voting allows elections to be illegitimate is just a question that I don't really care about. I keep stressing that. I keep saying that over again. But what's interesting is that conversation has actually devolved into something completely different, which has been proposed by the Democrats, which is that, if Donald Trump defunds the USPS to somehow stop mail-in voting from happening, or if he targets that, a subsequent consequence of that would be that all these people who live in rural communities will be harmed because they won't be able to get their medication. Apparently there was an elderly man who didn't get medication for the last few weeks because USPS doesn't have the funds. But I think this totally disregards the fact that the USPS is in control of two different, I guess the way I should put it is that the political issue and the voting issue is a completely different topic than the issue about whether or not people are getting the mail. And the fact that these are conjoined under the same system is what leads to the political uncertainty that allows for these elderly people in rural communities to be harmed. The fact that the USPS is a political institution itself and a monopolistic institution itself is what allows for this to happen. So I don't care if you're in favor of mail-in voting. I actually don't. I don't know where I stand on that issue as well. I honestly don't. I don't care about the issue as much. Like I said, all elections are illegitimate. But to then monopolize all mail and put people in a dangerous position where if this monopolized institution gets defunded by some political power or some political party or some politician, I think that that's the gross thing. I think that's the gross aspect of it all. Sure, like you can debate whether or not the USPS should be sending ballots to people's addresses, but the fact that Amazon can't deliver your mail is a totally different question. And I mean, I think you could argue that they should be governed by two different institutions. If they are going to be public, well, maybe the one who deals with elections is completely different and the USPS has nothing to do with it. But the fact that the USPS is a public monopoly is the exact reason why these people are going to suffer if that premise is true. So I think people really need to question whether or not government monopolies are actually a good thing. We're trained to believe that monopoly is bad ever since, we learned about the Sherman antitrust laws back in high school and how we needed to break up Rockefeller, and we needed, even now we're talking about whether or not we need to break up Amazon, which, Amazon provides some of the best services to the entire world. So we're talking about that now. But when it comes to government monopolies that actually allow for people to, be put in these situations where they're not getting medication for weeks, we don't even bat an eye. Actually, we suggest that these institutions need more funding. And it's kind of like, once we have something, we can't really imagine ourselves without it. So the best example is in Oregon. For the longest time, it was mandated by the government that you couldn't fuel up your own car, and someone would need to be at these gas stations to fuel them up for you. And then all of a sudden this law gets replaced, and people start demanding that the government reinstate this law, and they actually consider freedom to not fill your tank. They actually considered it to be coercion for the government to make you fill up your own gas. So that's kind of what happens when you allow a government institution to fill in and to replace your own reason and your own free will. That's the natural consequence of it. So now we're seeing people, well, what would we do without the USPS? As if it's completely impossible for Amazon or any other private service to pick up the cost, because I'm sure even people on the left will suggest that everyone runs by the profit motive. So to suggest that there wouldn't be someone who would want to pick up the weight of the people in these rural communities if the government let them actually do so, a lot of people don't realize that part of the reason the USPS has the power that it does is because the government doesn't allow competition. So when people obviously when supply is artificially low, people aren't going to get the services that they demand. And that's the problem that the government is creating right now. So this is just a rant, but basically if anyone wants to look into it, they should look into Lysander Spooner's competitor. He actually tried to start a competitor to the post office and the government shut it down. So here's just a rant. I actually want to hear from you guys. I post a lot of these videos, and I post them as if they're just true. And if anyone disagrees, please comment. Please get in touch with me on social media. You can follow me under Liam McCullum on Twitter, Facebook, and I believe it's Michael Liam McCullum on Instagram. And also you can subscribe to me on YouTube, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Apple Music, and Spotify. Subscribe, like, comment, share, and then let's just keep the conversation going. This, like I said, this is a caffeine-induced rant, like most of my podcasts are, but thank you for tuning in.